Hi, thanks for joining as we discuss reaping the benefits of streamlined formative assessments using the REAP formative quiz approach. So, first, let's talk about formative assessment. So, there's formative assessment and there's summative assessment. So, formative is before you take this big assessment at the end of course, and the summative would be the summative of the course, taking maybe the final quiz or the final activity to know if they pass or not. So, formative assessment is monitoring the student's learning matched with measuring, figuring out if the instructor's instruction is effective for each student individually, and of it identifying like the strengths and weaknesses. So that can be presented in multiple ways. It could be in quizzes or classroom discussions, assignments, peer reviews. There's so many, but this presentation is about formative quizzes. And the REAP formative quiz approach focuses on retention, assessment, engagement, and progress. For retention, we want to focus on building scaffolded assessments throughout the course. So at the beginning, you have assessment on what's going on and what their understanding comprehension is and how your instruction is. And then as you move through the course, you continue giving assessments, but then you pull the information from, say, module 1, you pull it to module 2, and you continue to assess and bring that information through the end of the course. So you don't just have a quiz on 20 questions on chapter 1, and then the next module, chapter 2, you have the questions. So you bring those questions from chapter 1 into chapter 2. So that's kind of holding retention throughout the course and keeping the pattern and encapsulating the whole course together. So once you reach the end, you are certain that they have continued to retain the information all the way through. So engagement. So this engagement is low stakes and it's outcome supported. So you have your outcomes for your course. And as you create these questions, you're not creating filler questions, which I wouldn't accuse anyone of doing, but just making sure that you are only using questions that go back to the outcome or lead to the outcome. Next is obviously assessment. That would be making sure that these questions that you create are sustainable enough for you as the instructor to use repeatedly. So the point of REAP is to create it once and leave it there and let it be. So these assessments would be questions that you would use all the time, repeated every semester, and you wouldn't have to change them unless the outcome changes. Progress. So at the end here, it's seeing what progress the students have made. And as I mentioned before, keeping the whole course going and moving with them retaining information. So you can consider that keeping the flow of the course and keeping the course intact. So it's not chunked all the time. I mean, there is the whole chunked learning, but keeping the consistency of the outcomes going throughout the whole entire course. So how you do that, there's 5 different steps. I'm going to read these and get a little bit more defined so I don't miss something for you. You create question banks. Some course books have quiz questions that come with your textbook. And then there's also the unique courses that you create. So going through those and figuring out which ones would be the best to match the outcomes and only putting those in the quiz banks. So for these formative, it would make sense that there were multiple choice or true and false. That way they're sustainable for you. And these are quick repetition questions that the students receive their feedback immediately. So they can take these quizzes over and over and over without an instructor having to be there. So you wouldn't use essay in this type formative assessment. And you would not use questions that are not relevant to outcomes, as I mentioned earlier. Step 2 is creating the quizzes from these quiz bank topics that are timely for the course material. So say you have in Module 1, you would have information there for them to learn, the knowledge base information, but then you would have this formative assessment. And then you wouldn't have, chapter 5 if you're only working on chapter 1. So it might be obvious, but you would have the questions there. And then Module 2, you would have questions for Module 2 and Module 1. And number 3, you would have questions for Module 3, Module 2, and Module 1. So that step 3 is making sure that the quiz banks are labeled very nicely so you know what's chapter 2, and if it's multiple choice. You might have essay questions in another format, but this REAP formative quiz approach would just be where the instructor doesn't have to intervene. Next is the integrate questions from previous quizzes, which I already mentioned, and then low stakes. So this is the tricky part. Have unlimited attempts, no time restraints, retain the highest score, randomize or shuffle the quiz, and so they can take this as many times as they want until they get to 100%. And increase the number of questions for each quiz. So maybe Module 1 has 20 questions. So Module 2 has 25 questions, 20 from Module 2 and then 5 from Module 1. Next is the student benefits. So this reinforces learning, reduces test anxiety, immediate feedback, identifies gaps in knowledge, boosts confidence. It encourages active recall, supports learning mastery, simple and time efficient, encourages focus on core concepts, scaffolds deeper learning through the course material. And that's the part where you're scaffolding as far as you're taking information from Module 1 and then you get deeper into Module 2 and deeper into Module 3 until you get to the end of the course. You might have, 100 or so questions at the end, but they're practicing repeatedly. Instructor benefits. So this is quick and efficient assessment, early detection of misconceptions, continuous feedback on teaching effectiveness, promotes adjustment to instruction. So if you see they're not getting something, you're able to adjust it quickly, and it encourages the data-driven teaching that you might need for yourself and for your own reviews and assessments. So that is how you use the REAP formative quiz approach. And remember, it provides repetitive, low-stakes questions, building lasting knowledge for long-term success. So as you create these quizzes, you'll see that they can use it for their own self-assessment, and you can use it for an understanding for yourself. Have a great one. Bye.